Hey guys, we're back. This time we're going to be taking a look at the Cardassian Union expansion for Star Trek Ascendancy. And Cardassians have always been one of my favorite factions since DS9. They were around in a couple episodes of TNG, but they weren't really fleshed out yet, and they didn't become their own thing until DS9. I love the Gaylor ships, I love their militaristic society, and they play very well and fitting to that aspect of their characters in the game here. They play very similar to the Klingons as far as being aggressive. Their main focus is planetary invasion, where the Klingons are based in space battles. But there's a few trade-offs as well. And we'll get right in and take a look at them. So the first thing we got on our player board here, we have our racial kind of a detriment here and a bonus over here. Our bonus is the annexation rule, in which case each time we successfully invade a planet, we're going to get an extra culture. Like I said, their main thing is going to be planetary invasion, so that's nice on there. Gives you that incentive to take over planets and add them to your union. Now the downside kind of coincides with that is our occupation here. And because of the way you have to force planets into joining your union, they're not always willing to help you. So any Cardassian controlled systems only generate production if there's a Cardassian ship in orbit. Now we've gone back and forth arguing on whether that applies to the homeworld or not. Some people say it does, some people say it doesn't. I say any controlled system, so that to me falls under the homeworld as well. So there's a big detriment when you think about it, because you have a limited number of ships. Now granted, I have the escalation pack in there, so there's an extra row and a half in the back there. So usually you only have these first 3 rows of ships, and being that you have to leave one in every system that you control really cuts down on the number of ships you have available. So you have to keep that in mind. And you have to have those ships out there if you want to generate any kind of production, which you need to produce the more ships and so on. So it's kind of a never-ending cycle as far as that goes. Now to help us out with that a little bit, we have our starting advancement here. Totalitarian regime. And the Cardassians begin with an extra command, so you actually have 6 commands instead of the 5 everybody else starts with. And that's going to let you have a couple extra commands to move around your ships and get them where they need to be, reposition and things like that, because you're going to be having to keep those ships in your system, so a lot of repositioning and things are needed. Now one of the key perks for playing them is because of that extra command right off the start, you can technically explore. If you burn your commands and don't do anything else, you can send 3 ships to warp, 3 ships out of warp, and explore 3 sectors on your first turn. It's kind of a gutsy move, depending on your turn order, but it spreads you out a little bit, doesn't let you do quite as much as other people, but at the same time you have that extra system, and as long as you're not the last player in the queue, starting out, you're pretty much guaranteed that all 3 are going to be planets. It's kind of a little cheap trick. It may get some people, get you on some people's bad sides, but the way the game is staged at the beginning of the game, there are 2 safe systems with planets for every player. So if you get to go before the last person, you know that there are systems in there, so you can steal 1 extra system basically and kind of screw over the last player, because then it's hit or miss if the second thing they explore is going to be another planet. So keep that in mind. It's a cool idea. You get an extra planet on the board, but at the same time you're going to make yourself an enemy, usually, unless they're extremely nice people. So take a look at our fleets here. Our first fleet is the Hunter-Killers, and in the first round of space battles, that fleet's all the rolls to hit are automatically score a hit, so you don't even need to roll. And it's a 3-ship fleet. If it takes a single casualty, it breaks up the fleet. So it's kind of an offensive fleet. It's very good early on because you can get 3 ships out there and basically patrol with them, keep your borders safe, and people are less likely to attack you if they know you're guaranteed 3 hits on your first round of battle. And it does only apply to space battles, so keep that in mind too. Second fleet we have is the Overseer fleet. This one's kind of a particular favorite of mine. And if this fleet's in a Cardassian controlled system during the resource generation, you double the amount of production generated by that system. and doesn't work on Cardassia Prime, specifically says so. That's another reason why I think the you have to have a ship even in your home world to get that generation, like we were talking about with Occupation, because this card specifically says it doesn't give you the bonus for being in orbit. They wouldn't even mention that if you didn't need to be in orbit to begin with on that one, so kind of go both ways, but I'm still leaning towards all planets. So what it basically boils down to is you're committing 3 ships, because you need 3 in the fleet instead of 1, to a system to generate that production, where normally you have to have 1 ship in orbit to get your normal production. Now you're putting 3 there, but you're generating double. Now in a normal system that only has 1 production node, it's not that beneficial. But if you get something like the Voltag mining asteroid, I think it is, I'm not sure what the exact name is, but it's got 4 production nodes, suddenly you're doubling that, it becomes well worth it. So you really have to pick and choose where you deploy that fleet. But in the right system, anything that has 2 or more production nodes, you're going to be making a decent profit on that. And it's very useful. Our last fleet is a assault fleet. And this one has 6 ships in it. And it can reroll hits of 1 during planetary invasions. Plays into our annexation ability. You're going to be going for those planetary invasions. Now you get to reroll. On the flip side of all of these is a generic 9-ship fleet. Also nice for planetary invasions, when you can just outnumber people. So let me take a look at our Cardassian advancements. A lot of cool stuff in here. The question is, the trade-off is if you want to boost up your weapons, or if you're looking to get some of these projects in play. There's a lot of interesting projects in here, a lot of military ones that are going to help you get those planetary invasions rolling, and rake in some bonuses from those. I always like labor camps here. During your resource generation, your culture nodes also generate a production if you have at least 1 ship in orbit. Most of your planets that have a culture node are going to have a production node, so you're going to have a ship in orbit anyway to collect on that production. So this is kind of like double dipping. Covert military bases can be used very strategically. During your build phase, you can build up to 3 ships in an uncontrolled system. So if your rivals have just uncovered a new system, but they don't have any ships nearby, maybe their ship died to a hazard or whatever, you can build ships in that system that's uncontrolled, and then attempt to colonize that before they can. Kind of get in there and steal it, basically. Can be used very sneakily. Fits in very well with the Cardassians sliding in there and stealing things. The Gravitic Sensor Net is an interesting card, however it does specify that it only works against the Romulan cloaking technology. There are a upgrade for the Klingons that gives them cloaking technology as well, but the way it's worded, it will not work against that, which is kind of sucks. And I think one of the fan-made factions have a cloaking device too, so that one's kind of hit or miss. If nobody's playing Romulans, obviously it's kind of pointless, so it's really limited. I usually tend to skip that one. Infiltration protocols can be a fun one. It allows you to research your opponent's advancements. So depending on who you're going against, if you know they have some interesting things in their deck, you might want to go through and take a look at some of them and see if there's any projects in there that you want to research for yourself. Sensor ghosting and holo projections are good for, especially later in the game. They kind of protect your ships in space battles. It forces your rival to re-roll their hits if they have a really good roll and they have a big amount of hits. You can make them re-roll that. There's no chance saying they won't roll just as good, and if they already rolled weak, you might not want to use it because they might roll better. It's kind of hit or miss on there, but it is an interesting ability, and it can be used on your rival's turn, so when they attack you, you can still use it. So thinking they have a big advantage works great against things with First Strike, who are going in there and attacking you, and suddenly they roll 9 hits on a big fleet. And you're like, yeah, I don't think so, and you play that, make them re-roll that, and hopefully some of your ships will survive to fight back. Confiscation protocols is a nice one. When you successfully invade a planet, you get a production token for each intact node. Goes good with our annexation. We're trying to successfully invade planets. The ones that it kind of counters with are these two here, and this is a combo that's been around since the faction was first introduced. So the first part of it here is metagenic weapons. And when you're invading a planet, you can exhaust this card instead of rolling to hit. All your dice this round automatically hit and destroy nodes. This is helpful for wiping out a planet that you might not necessarily want to annex. Now, you don't get the culture for this because annihilating a planet does not count as a successful invasion. And this kind of goes against everything you want to do with this faction because you're trying to annex the planets, you're trying to bring them in to get that extra culture, and this doesn't do it. However, if you combine it with annexation protocols, then invading a planet, a total annihilation result counts as a successful attack. So these go against your confiscation protocols where you're trying to leave things intact. If you can't leave things intact, these two combined basically wipes out a planet. Wiping out a planet counts as a successful invasion. And also when you successfully invade and you have this in play, you get to refresh 2 of your commands, which is really nice. Lets you do something else, maybe invade another planet. Weaponized star bases is another nice one. You have our cool DS9 looking Nora class stations there. And they give you an additional 3 dice to hit. Helps you defend them when you're being attacked in the system that has them. Gravitic minefields. These are good early on because they can protect your systems that you control, because usually, especially farther back in your empire, you're only going to have one ship there just to get the production off of it. So you're going to be spread out pretty thin a lot of times, except for your main attack fleets that are going to be out doing their thing. So it basically turns all of your systems into a hazard level 5 system. However, once somebody boosts up their shields a little bit, it's not really an issue. So early on to mid-game or so, it's a decent one. Later on, if you draw this late in the game, it's usually not even worth getting because most people have at least 1 shield upgrade at that point. And if you have 2 shield upgrades, it basically makes it useless. So the last real one of interest here is the reactive energy barriers. And this is a defensive card for your systems. Again, you're not going to have a lot of defense. You're going to be spread pretty thin. So if somebody does try to invade your system, you get to ignore the first 2 of the attacking rivals' hits in the first round of combat. Now, if combat's prolonged, you're probably still going to lose, but at the same time, it gives you that little extra chance to survive that initial battle and inflict some damage back on them, hopefully whittle their numbers down a little bit. Overall, though, I think the Cardassians are a very fun faction to play. They do require a little bit more strategy. I'd say not quite as much as the Romulans or the Ferengi, but a little bit more than the Klingons kind of point and shoot. You have to make do with limited numbers of ships because you're going to be spread out on your planets if you want to get that production. If you pool all your ships together to make a nice invasion force, you're going to find yourself lacking in production in order to rebuild ships after combat. Big thing with the Cardassians is to find a ally early on and kind of make an agreement with them, non-aggression pact, whatever you want to do, because most of the other players are going to recognize that you are a very aggressive fleet. You are going to be going out, you're going to be invading planets. If you're lucky, you come across a bunch of warp-capable civilizations that are easy to invade. If you end up with a enemy rival or somebody you really want to go after, everybody's going to know, you're going for the invasion, you're getting the annexation, you're using those advancements in there to get bonuses from it, but you're going to be attacking someone eventually at some point throughout the game. Cardassians are one of the easier ones to go for a militaristic victory by taking over other homeworlds, so people are going to be expecting that from you too. So if you get too close to somebody's homeworld, expect some severe resistance because they're going to build up a defense knowing that you possibly going for that invasion. The real hardest part of playing the Cardassians is to defend your own borders. You want to expand, you want to move out, you want to take over those planets to get the bonuses, but at the same time, if you spread your empire too big, you spread your ships too thin, it makes you an easy target for other factions to just move in and start mowing you down and rolling over. So you want to keep your borders tight enough that you can defend it, but spread out enough that you're getting bonuses from taking over planets. I have found myself at times taking over a planet just to get the bonuses, and then falling back and leaving it. And you'll still get the culture off it, you'll still get research if you have nodes built. You won't get the production unless you have a ship in order. That's a big thing. It's only the production you don't get if you don't have a ship in order. The others you do get. So keep that in mind. You don't always need to have a ship in orbit too. But as I was saying, I've found myself several times taking a planet farther out, getting the bonuses from taking the planet, and then falling back, letting somebody else take it over, because then it gives you a chance to move back in, take it over again. And if they want to keep playing that game with you, you can keep falling back, moving in, taking the planet over, falling back. And they get some bonuses too for taking it over. You lose some ships or nodes and things in the process. So there is wear and tear involved in that, but you usually make out better in the deal by getting that extra culture for retaking the planet, as long as you're not wiping it out. And even that can be mitigated by some of our advancements there. Overall, though, I think they're a really fun faction to play. As I said in the beginning, they are my favorite faction in Star Trek, so I'm kind of a little biased when it comes to that. They are a bit more complicated than the base factions as far as knowing when to leave a ship behind, having smaller fleets overall. Our generic 9-ship fleet is still nothing to ignore, but we have 2 of our main named fleets are only 3 ships, and the assault fleet, which should be our most powerful, is only a 6-ship fleet. So keep in mind, in most circumstances, you're probably going to be slightly outgunned, if not outnumbered, because your ships are going to be spread out. So you want to pick fights on your terms. As I said, you're going to want to boost up your weapons, possibly your shields. You're going to be doing most of your fighting invading planets, which only have 4 nodes. So keep that in mind. You have a 6-ship fleet that excels at attacking planets, or you can use your 9-ship fleets. Losing a couple ships in the process really isn't that big of a deal, so I tend to shy away from shields unless you have a very aggressive other player out there playing something like the Klingons, who are constantly, after you, shooting at you. Again, it may go into that when the Andorians come out, because I'm assuming they're going to be a rather aggressive species as well. But for now, I tend to stick away from shields, maybe one upgrade just to help out with phenomenon and hazardous systems. Weapons, usually I like to stay about 1 click above everybody else, or on par at least with whoever's the highest. And it also helps you in your invasion, so they're nice to have too. And then there's like a handful of good resources in there in the advancement deck, depending on what kind of strategies you're going for. And basically go all out on those invasions. That's their thing. And that's pretty much it for our look at the Cardassian Union faction for Star Trek Ascendancy. Hope I helped you out a little bit. I know I'm kind of biased on this one because, as I said, they are my favorites. But I do think they play very well. And I love the thematic aspect of having to have your ships in orbit to kind of force your planets to produce things after forcing them to join your union. And it's just a very nice nod to the way the Cardassians have been portrayed in the show. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed watching the video. As always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.